So there should be sound right now. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday.
I get Monday, but yeah. It's okay. I've got lots of
So that's going to be me.
My whole life's basically vacation, so. Retirement is a strange trip.
3-4.
testing, 1, 2, 3.
All seniors to report to the auditorium at this time. All seniors to the auditorium.
So are we going
camp. Today we gather to commemorate Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, a day to stop and remember those victims of the Holocaust, to read their names and remember. The Remembrance ceremony today has two parts. The first part is the name reading ceremony. We will read the names of 24 individuals who perished at the hands of the Nazis. They will be remembered one by one. In the second part of the ceremony, we will have the privilege of hearing from Holocaust survivor Charles Coca. Reading the names of men, women, and children killed by Nazi Germany and its collaborators is a simple and powerful way to remember these individuals. Victims of the Holocaust do not have a grave, and so in that way, reciting the names in any given community allows them to be memorialized. To remember these people as human beings, as individuals, who have a life story, who had history. It is meant for us to understand this happened to people like us. It happened one by one. It happened gradually. And also to remind us of the dignity of each of these individuals, and that we restore their memory by this simple act of reading their name.
Louis Levy, born in 1864 in Germany. Louis was deported to Terezin concentration camp, where he was murdered by the Nazis in 1942. Louis was 78 years old.
Enoch Cornfield, born in 1938 in Poland. In July 1942, Enoch and his family were deported to Belgic extermination camp where they were gassed. Enoch was 3 years old.
Franco Cessna, born in Italy in 1931. Franco joined an Italian partisan group in 1943 at the age of 12. He was shot at the age of 12 by the Germans during a scouting mission. He was Italy's youngest partisan.
Henny Sherman, born in February 1912 in Germany. In 1940, Henny was arrested for refusing to change her name to a more Jewish name. She was sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Henny was gassed by the Nazis in 1942. She was 30 years old.
Pfeiffer, born May 1934 in the Netherlands. In May 1944, Jan Peter was deported with his parents to Auschwitz, where he was gassed. He was 10 years old.
Thomas Coca, born in May 1934 in Moravia. Thomas and his family were deported to the Sobibor extermination camp in May 1942, where he was gassed. He was 7 years old.
Joseph Wilk, born in 1925 in Poland. Joseph and his family were sent to Warsaw Ghetto in 1943, where he was part of an uprising. He was killed during the uprising. He was 18 years old.
Marcus Fink, born in 1914 in Belgium. Marcus was deported to Birkenau concentration camp, where he was murdered by the Nazis in September 1942. Marcus was 28 years old.
Joseph Domini, born in 1926 in Greece. Joseph and his family were deported to Auschwitz in March 1944. He was gassed in Auschwitz in October 1944. He was 18 years old.
Sari Goldstein was born in 1926 in Romania. Sari was deported to Auschwitz, where she was murdered by the Nazis in October 1944. Sari was 18 years old.
Judith Schwed, born in January 1932 in Hungary, and in June 1944, Judith and her family were deported to Auschwitz. Judith was gassed upon arrival. She was 12 years old.
Auschwitz, where she was murdered by the Nazis in 1943. Laura was 39 years old.
Nellie Adler. Nellie was born in February 1930 in Belgium. Nellie and her family were deported to Auschwitz in May 1944. She was gassed by the Nazis there. She was 14 years old.
Frederick Dermaborn, in 1925 in Austria, or born in 1925 in Austria. In 1942, Frederick was deported to a labor camp. He was never heard from again. He was 17 years old.
Marcus Foss, born in 1925 in Poland. Marcus and a friend were arrested by the Nazis in 1943 after being found hiding in the forest. They were never seen or heard again. Marcus was 18 years old.
Frieda Lissner, born in 1879 in Berlin, Germany. Frieda was deported to Terezin concentration camp, where she was murdered by the Nazis in February of 1943. Frieda was 64 years old. Max Rosenblatt, born in 1939 in Poland. Max and his mother were deported to Treblinka extermination camp in 1942. They were gassed upon arrival. Max was 3 years old.
Sarah Kawa, born in 1868 in Poland. Sarah was deported to Majdanek concentration camp in Lublin Poland, where she was murdered by the Nazis in March 1943. Sarah was 75 years old.
Bertha Adler, born in June 1928. In May 1944, Bertha and her family were deported to Auschwitz, where she was gassed 2 days later. Bertha was 15 years old.
Eva Heyman was born in 1931 in Romania. Eva was deported at Auschwitz in 1944, where she died 4 months later. Eva was 13 years old.
Abraham Weiss, born in 1889 in Poland. Abraham was deported to Belgium extermination camp, where he was gassed in August 1942. Abraham was 53 years old.
Rachel Beck, born in 1878 in Romania. Rachel was deported to Auschwitz, where she was murdered by the Nazis in 1944. Rachel was 66 years old. Helen Klotz, born in 1931 in Hungary. Helen Klotz was deported to Auschwitz in May 1944, where she was gassed upon arrival. Helen was 13 years old.
Adolf Hitler was born on August 1st, 1893 in Warsaw, Poland, beloved father of Charles, Bernard, and Henriette. On May 10, 1940, the Rotmier family were involved in a tragic train accident which claimed the lives of Adolf's wife and daughter. In June 1943, Adolf was arrested by the Gestapo and sent to the Malines prison in Belgium. From here, he would be sent with 1,186 other people to Auschwitz. Everyone was gassed upon arrival. Adolf was 50 years old. The United States Congress established the Days of Remembrance as the nation's annual commemoration of the Holocaust and created the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum as a permanent living memorial to the victims. May 8th will be the 77th anniversary of the end of World War II, known as VE, or Victory in Europe Day. That day officially ended the Holocaust, and when the Allies accepted the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. So why, more than 70 years later, are we commemorating and remembering on this day? Today we remember those who were left without a voice and acknowledge those voices that are still able to speak, to allow them to share their stories. We also continue to speak up for those who are still being persecuted and killed because of their beliefs, because of the color of their skin, because they are different. Armenia, Rwanda, Darfur, Cambodia, Syria, Ukraine. By remembering the victims of the Holocaust, we defy the Nazis' attempts to dehumanize and destroy the Jewish people. We remember the history of the Holocaust as a history of individuals, and this in itself is an act of resistance. It is a great honor for me to introduce our speaker, Mr. Charles Rothwell. Charles was born in Strasbourg, France in 1932, the youngest of 3 children. Charles was only a young boy when the Nazis began their reign of terror in Europe, forcing he and his family to flee their home, trying to escape. While trying to flee Belgium in 1940, Charles lost his mother and his sister in a train accident. In 1943, after their father was arrested and deported to Auschwitz, Charles and his older brother Bernard found themselves alone and in need of help. Their help came in the form of a Catholic monk, Father Bruno. Charles and Bernard were hidden for the rest of the war with Christian families, thanks to the direct efforts of Father Bruno and the Catholic Church. Charles and his brother joined their aunt and uncle in New York in 1946, and Charles eventually made his way here to us in Maine. Please help me in welcoming Holocaust survivor and my friend, Charles.
Can you all hear me? Yes. Is everybody awake? My job is to wake you up. Where's we go? The space bar. Oh, not the space bar. Yes. This. Yeah. Okay. So I need to go to the first slide. Okay. So a part of the so my name is Charles Rothmel. I was born in Strasbourg, France, in October 29, 1932, which means, if you do the math, this October, this year, I'll turn 90. I'm a good example of longevity. This is the brief summary of what I want to talk about, where, you know, I gotta move this over more. There we go. Maybe this could be moved over, yeah. I went from Strasbourg to Paris, lived there for a while, then Vienna in Austria, and from Vienna to Brussels. And in Vienna, we went through the Kristallnacht, night of broken glass. And the reason it's called Kristallnacht is because the Germans claimed that the Jews were using crystals for their store windows, not glass, which is, of course, propaganda. So there's Strasbourg. Strasbourg is on the border of France and Germany. So the city of Strasbourg is on the border, is bilingual. Je kann Deutsch sprechen, je peux parler français. You could speak French, you could speak German. As a child, you speak both languages. And then on top of that, there was Yiddish, which is really kind of a slang version of German, mixed in with local languages like Russian and Polish and so forth. Strasbourg is also known for the cathedral and for the clock. One of the first clocks in the world was at the Cathedral of Strasbourg. And the clock was also the beginning of mechanized machines, the Industrial Revolution, the idea of having wheels, turning other wheels, and so on. There's Hitler. Hitler came in power very early on, and he was very charismatic. This is why even today, you have to be aware of politicians. It depends not on what they say, but the charisma. And Hitler had a mesmerizing effect on people. Even in 1933, the New York Times already used the word atrocities, because during the Euro persecution, Jews were persecuted and accused of many different things. Even the crucifixion of Jesus. I remember myself being accused of that many times, but children of my age. So it said atrocities at the hands of the Nazis. There were public hangings, and there were mass executions. It was common for me to walk in the street and see some man or woman, or even a young girl, hanging from a lamppost. And they would have a sign that says, you do this to us, we do this to you. It was very frightening times. This is my family. One of the few pictures that I have left, because it was not a good idea during the war to have any photographs of anything. The less you knew about yourself, the better. The more anonymous you were, the better. So my sister Henriette is in the back, my mother Dora, my father, name was Adolphe, but spelled A-D-O-L-P-H-E, called him Adi. My brother Bernard, and the little cute boy that that's me. That was my sister in the go-kart. I remember that go-kart because one time my brother put me down a hill with the go-kart. I could barely keep control of it. But he used to play jokes with me. I was trying to show you kind of a picture of how Jewish wedding, but very often, whenever we have meals or holidays, like Passover that's coming up, is celebrated around the table. And you not only wine and dine, but you also pray. So the house becomes a temple. And that is an example of a lot of dancing goes on and singing. And that happens around the holidays. And Hanukkah is another one. So it's more than a religion almost, it's a tradition. This is the parliament of Hitler. And Goebbels was the head of propaganda. Even Hitler, in his book Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle, which he wrote in prison, described the fate of the Jews and the eventual destruction. He blamed them. He said the Jews are misfortune. They have all the money. And anti-Semitism goes many years, of course, even to the time where his death was blamed on the Jews when the Romans really were responsible. Julius Streicher was a propagandist for the Germans. And here he is an announcement that he's going to spricht über die Juden in unserer Unglück. He's going to speak to the people that the Jews are misfortune. And they would fill stadiums to go on, and there would be people get all revved up about the Jews. We got to do something about them. Oh, I want to go back. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I wanted to go back. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. That was a real photograph, I mean a painting, of a Hasidic Jew, that means a religious Jew. And very often it's stereotype. You don't look like that unless you're very religious. And a bit like the Muslims, who don't believe in shaving their beards, or keeping their hair on their face and all that. But then they made a caricature of this. And this is a caricature of a Jew. On the one hand, he has all the gold in the world. See? And on the other hand, he is a communism. Is also a Jew, which is kind of true. Karl Marx was Jewish. And he wrote Das Kapital in England. And this is the wandering Jew. So it's a caricature. Very derogatory. And this is a picture I found at Bowdoin College in their archives. They have a very good Holocaust archive where a teacher is showing to a student how to identify a Jewish nose, as if there was such a thing as a Jewish nose. They even had pictures of people in this book, the Jüdische Nase, including on the bottom Sigmund Freud, look, the Jewish nose, which is so-called propaganda. There's no such thing. In Vienna, in 1938, Vienna was taken over, Austria was taken over by Germany. It's called the Anschluss, or the rape of Austria. And this is a picture of Hitler being welcomed to Austria, where they cheered him on, and that's where I, as a child, saw him. In the background, you can see the Ferris wheel. I think I have a close-up of it. The Riesenrad, which is still the giant Ferris wheel. And I don't know if any of you ever saw The Third Man with Orson Welles. Anybody seen that movie? Yeah, it's in that Ferris wheel. There's a scene where he's trying to push one of them off. But I've been up that Ferris wheel even recently when I went back to Austria. This is the extent of the extreme devotion to Nazism. The only place you see that now is when you see movies about China, where you see this kind of mass demonstrations, where everybody's out and doing the Hitler salute. The Hitler salute was actually originated by Mussolini in Italy, having your hand up in the air. And the swastika is actually an Indian symbol of the rising sun. But it became ominous whenever you saw that anywhere. So in 1938, we moved to Vienna. In doing that, we entered the mouth of the wolf. November 11, 1938, throughout the city, the annexation of Austria, Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, and the war against the Jews took full force. The next morning, my sister and I, Henriette, walked around the city, and I walked under broken glass. The windows were broken, they were smashed, or some of them were marked. And even the New York Times wrote a detailed accounting of it, which means that people knew about it. Nazis smashed, loot, and burned Jewish shops and temples until Goebbels called them. Goebbels was the head of propaganda. His motto was, make the lie big enough and they'll believe you. And repeat it often. And there are photographs of people being forced to scrub the street. And what they were scrubbing was the word Austria. Because the German was saying, Austria doesn't exist anymore. It's all part of the Third Reich. My father was arrested and went to prison, but he was released. And we left Vienna. And you wouldn't talk about what they did to him, but there was a lot of humiliation where they had to walk around the prison yard without any clothes on, in the cold. So we left Vienna in 1938, and we went to a little community in Belgium called Barnef. It was an estate that was given over to refugees. And this particular one was Jewish, so they had a big kitchen, and we ate communal meals. So for a while it was very peaceful. And there were a room with about 6 bathtubs, and my mother was in charge. And I used to be in a bathtub almost all day, every day. But then in 1939, Germany invaded Poland, just took it over. And Hitler told the Austrians, don't even think of defending yourself, we are coming in. And Austria did not defend themselves, because it's also a German-speaking country. So they united together, but we had to leave. But that was officially World War II began, where England began involved, and eventually the United States. Again, it's reported in the New York Times. And the New York Times does not have headlines like this with big letters unless it's a major news. Even recently, the New York Times had one about the World Trade Center with big headlines. Germany attacks Poland. Danzig is accepted in the Reich. So Austria becomes, but then they invaded Holland and Belgium, that's us. And my family and a lot of us went on the road and walked. And this is why I sympathize with Ukraine today. I know what they're going through. We were on the road with our bags, running away from the enemy. Not only that, there were also mass executions, like Babi Yar, or just people were taken to the woods, an entire village as well, executed. There was a German unit called the Einsatzgruppe. They were very, very vicious. They were coming to a town, gather the people, and execute them. Again, the New York Times reports on this. The Belgian and the Dutch are trying to defend themselves, but they are nothing against the strength of the Germans. And in England, Chamberlain, who was the prime minister, who talked to Hitler and came back with peace on our time, but Churchill said, no, you can't believe that man. And Churchill became prime minister, Winston Churchill, who I also saw once in a parade in Belgium after the liberation. So we joined the people with our bags and all, and we walked on the road. This is an aerial photograph of what it was like. And there used to be on the side of the road a ditch. And once in a while when a plane came overhead, we had to run into the ditch. This is another photograph. There were people like this, and it was very dangerous. There was even one carriage like that with a horse that was shot down by a plane, and the horse and the people were killed. And I saw them on the ground dead, and my mother was trying to shield my eyes so I wouldn't be able to see the massacre. My father said, I can't do this. I'm going to go and find a wheelbarrow. And he left us there. We waited for him to come back. But you can imagine the chaos. Children get lost in shopping malls. This is like a shopping mall. And there was just total confusion. And you can get lost. So we waited for him until it got very dark and we didn't know what to do. So we walked. This is a child's drawing of something like what it reminded me of us waiting, sitting on our suitcases for him, but he never came back. So we lost my father. At early dawn, there were these blue lights that led to the train station. And we got down below the hill and we get on the train. And I'm on the train, and the train goes north and away from trouble towards Rouen, the city of Rouen. And I'm in the corridor of the train. And all of a sudden, I'm lifted off my feet and I'm flying across from here to the seat. And I'm knocked out. The train crashed. But because I was in the corridor, I had almost no injuries. I was just banged up. But the people in the compartment were seriously hurt. When I regained, there was even a newspaper article which said the 10th of May, 1940, near the line of the north, near Mogny-la-Pommeraye was the village where the crash occurred. Whatever it was, I walked down, I walked up, I was unconscious, and I jumped off the train on top of a dead man that was laying there. And I rolled over the grass. And in his pocket he had a fountain pen, which I took in my hand. And to this day I have a thing about fountain pens. I collect them. This is the painting I did of what I saw. The train is on the left. And, am I right? Yeah, the train is on the left. And the people, the wounded, are laid down on the field, what they call the triage. It's a term from World War I, which means you take care of every third person, the ones who look like they're most likely to survive. The ones that look very damaged, go to them last. And they walked around, but because I wasn't outside the compartment, I was just walking around this. And then I found in the stretchers on the right, my brother was on a stretcher. He was thrown off the train and he twisted his legs. My mother was on a stretcher. She was injured, injuries. She had internal organs injury. And my sister was sitting up, and she had what they call poiement de la figure. She had a face was damaged. I can't describe it. It was frightening. And I heard that when we left, that she died on the scene. This is an article which cites the accident and gave the name of all the people. And in yellow, it says, les enfants Rodmil, the children Rodmil, which means my brother and I and my sister. And we were taken to the hospital, which is called l'Hôtel Dieu de Rouen, called the Hotel God of Rouen. The hospital now, that same building is more like an office building, but then it was a hospital. And I went into the children's ward. And I wasn't allowed to leave, but I snuck out of my bed and ran around to find my mother. And I found her in bed. She had jaundice, she looked yellow, and we did talk. And then during an air raid, because we were being bombed by the Germans and the English. Eventually, Americans were involved, but not yet. When I asked about my sister, they told me she died on the scene. And I asked about my mother, and I found her. And then later, during an air raid, my brother appeared. And then, about 10 of us were taken away from the Rouen, all the way to the west of France, to the coast of Brittany, which is very much like Maine. It's very rocky and it's on the ocean. And we were taken to a little island. It was then run by nuns. And it was also, now it's a scientific retreat where they do maritime biology. And we went to the island, Ile de Berbère, which is French Celtic. It's a mix of Irish, English, and French, because the northern part of France at one time was occupied by England. There's the island. I go back there once in a while. When I went back last time, they were having a music festival. And when we had to take a boat to go across. Or there's a bridge at high tide, there's a bridge. At low tide. At high tide, you can't get to the island unless you have a boat. France fell in 1940. They gave up. And Germany took over France. So now Germany had almost all of Europe under their control. And Italy, Mussolini was taking care of Italy. And Madame Good, who was the finance minister's wife of Belgium, she was volunteering. She drove us in her car all the way to Brussels in the hope of finding my father. My brother went to the hospital and before we left and asked about my mother. And my mother said, décédé. And my brother didn't know what that meant. It meant deceased, that my mother had died. And suddenly, there we were. My mother and sister had died. We didn't know who my father was. We were virtually orphans. This day, I've been back to the Catastrophe de Morny, which is, I've been back to Morny many times, to the cemetery, where I see my sister's grave and my mother are buried there. with a cross. It's not a Jewish. Many times my brother wanted to exhume the graves to put them in the Jewish cemetery, but I said, forget it, they're fine. I don't think God is going to mind that we're there. And these were lists of the dead. But this one is Mademoiselle Rothmille Saison, meaning my sister was 16 when she died. I'm using the veil because, from memory, you remove the 7 veils, and behind each one, you get more and more memories. In the mouth of the wolf. First, we moved in with Madame Gut in Brussels. And we were living in, she had a very nice house in Brussels. But it couldn't last very long. Yeah, Mr. Good was finance minister of Belgium. And it's amazing that she was doing this volunteer work. And a lot of them, like the high status, were doing volunteer work. Just like Eleanor Roosevelt became involved with the war, you know, also. And there was a garden in the back, a fruit garden. She had apples and pears growing there. And I remember eating myself sick one time, really sick, because I ate everything inside. But where was Father? That's what we didn't know. So my brother comes back one day and said, guess what? We found Father. Father had left us, and he said he lost his way. He couldn't find us back, and he made his way back to Brussels. Now, at that time, because we were occupied by the Germans, had occupied Belgium, if you were Jewish, you had to be registered. And that's Jood, which is Dutch for Jew. And then you had to get a star that you had to wear on your clothes, which is almost something like medieval time, where Jews were identified. So my father came home when he had the ration cards for food, and he had the Jewish star, but he burned them in an ashtray. He said, we're not going to wear these. First, he found it humiliating, and also it was a dead giveaway, because eventually when they picked everybody up, when the years of extermination, I would see truckload of people heading for the death camps, when the final solution was to kill all the Jews. They managed that 12 million went to the gas, 12 million people went to the gas chamber. Handicap and all that. I've been back to Auschwitz to visit, and there's even an exhibition of crutches, all kind of handicaps up to show that we even had handicap going who were considered unworthy of living. Now the stars, the Mogen David, which is a very important religious symbol, like the cross for the Christians, for the Jews is the Star of David. It's called the Star of David. In Yiddish, it's Mogen David. Mogen David. This is the kind of propaganda that used to exist in Belgium. Wallon is a part of Belgium, which is sort of Dutch-speaking, Flemish. It says, Wallon, open your eyes. Your only enemy, the one you have to fear the most, is a Jew. And it goes on. And it shows, again, a caricature of a Jew with Stalin, Churchill, and I can't tell who the third person is, but these are the enemy of the people. Or Karl Marx were enemy, and the Jew were part of it, were responsible for it. People believe it. This is one of the few relics that I have from my childhood, because we destroyed everything. It's my math book from the first grade, and it's bought by the director I'm very happy with this notebook. Je suis très content de ce cahier. This is an order in the 25th of July, 1942. The old Jews are no longer allowed to go to public school. And all of a sudden, we could not, even in Belgium, we're not allowed to go to school. For a while, my brother and I would go to school, but eventually, even the teacher disappeared. He was arrested. So we realized it wasn't safe anymore. And my brother had an idea. I was too young to have an identification. You had to be 16, you had to get an ID. Well, let me see if I can open this. Yeah, I can't do it. You need the strength of a woman to open this problem. What's that? Am I too long?
We have 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
20 minutes? More. Okay, thank you. Boy, water never tasted so good. I didn't have to have that as a young boy. I didn't have to, and that kind of saved me. I also did not have the stereotype look of a Jew, which means I could pass as a Christian. Now, the Pfeiffer gendarmerie, military police, used to march in the street of Belgium. They were military, but they were very fierce. And they wore this metal plaque, which bounced and they walked them on like that. It's very 1984 kind of thing. And one time I saw one of them slash all 4 tires of a car that was illegally parked. There was stuff like that. But as soon as I saw one, I would hide, I would disappear. I didn't want to be confronted by them. And one time I saw one of them take his rifle and beat someone to the ground. May have killed him. And one time I lived in a house called Maison de Plaisir, the House of Pleasure, that my father had put us there in a room way on top. It turned out to be, it was a house of prostitution, which catered to the Germans. And I remember being there, I don't know, I was too young to understand what was going on, but I was hiding in the top room with my brother. And one time there was a dinner to honor a German officer, and we were sitting at a table. It was almost like Alice in Wonderland. And my brother and I were sitting at the other end, and all the women were on the side, and the officer was the head. And we were whining and dying, and he got up and made a speech, which was very much the kind of speech that Hitler was doing, talking about the new millennium, the future, which to this day I have a hard time listening to political speeches, period. It reminds me of propaganda. You can't believe what you hear, and you have to believe what you see. That was the motto. In the morning, sometimes, we would hear doors slamming. And what it was a Gestapo. We'll go up and down and slam all the doors to kind of wake you up. I'm talking about 5, 6 in the morning. And suddenly, I'm in my bed and there's a man standing at Gestapo with a gun to my head, a Luger. And he's shouting to me, "Get up, aufstehen, runtergehen, go downstairs." And I was interrogated by the Gestapo. And I stood in front of them like a tribunal. And they said, "Tu es juif? Bist du Jude? Are you a Jew?" And I was so scared I didn't talk. And luckily enough, they chased me out of the room. I was 10 years old then, so it didn't matter. But then my father, who did not wear the store, was arrested in the street. And we were told by a neighbor that someone had betrayed him. There was a man who rode around in a car with the Gestapo, who would say, that's a Jew right there. He was turning in people, and they would arrest them and put them in cars. This was the point where it was decided to annihilate all the Jews, the year of extermination. That was a photograph that I found at the Belgium prison, Malines, of my father, a mugshot. It's the last photograph I have of him, as he was arrested before. He ended up, the train that he was on, everyone aboard, 1,508 people, went right to the gas chamber. This way, they took sack out of him, and I still have all this stuff. I even have the passport. They took away from him and stayed in a farm in Belgium all these years. And about 10 years ago, someone sent them to me with my father's passport and signing. These are all the elements. And the Gestapo record, that when they interrogated my father, all they wanted to know is where he lived. Because then they could go there and raid the house to see if they find more Jews to arrest. And this is the record, the registry of all those who went to the camps. And my father's listed there as number 79 on the train. But he did not stay in the camp. He was sent to the gas chamber upon arrival. Gazi al-Aribi. In fact, that's what it said. Out of that train, 1,008 were exterminated. Only 400 were matriculated, probably young people who didn't know they could put to work. There's a movie called Son of Saul, which describes that process of how they did that. I don't know if anyone has seen that, the movie of when they showed people going to showers, but they were not showers, they were gas pipes. So they came to us and said, you have to hide. They're going to come and get you. No one could help us. My brother told me to wait. He went to a priest in a church and said, I can't help you. But I knew of somebody in a monastery. And my brother took a train. Well, this shows a little boy being arrested by the mayor, who knows a Nazi man and found that picture. So we found Père Bruno. I'm standing on the steps. He changed my name. He says, you are now Romieux. And later, my name was Charles von Romstam, which are like Belgian names. And I was anonymous, and I was not Jewish. I even went to the church. I even started to pray for real. I liked the whole system where you could pray to saints. And then I became an altar boy. There was no better way to hide than that. And I was able to, I knew some Latin phrases. I could assist in the Mass and move the book from one end to the other. And sometimes while I was doing that, there would be Gestapo agents in the church. So Père Bruno, at this point, he was hiding about 300 children. He had asked the abbot if he could do this, because he realized we were in danger and he wanted to help. So my brother told me to wait on the stoop of the house. We were sat on the stoop. And then I waited and waited until Father Bruno suddenly appeared. That's what he looked like. Very saintly man. He's died since. I've been to his grave in Belgium. Very simple grave. But he came to me and he said, Tu es petit Charles? "Are you little Charles?" I said, "Oui." And he said, "Take my hand, don't say a word." And I went with him, and I hid in the monastery. From there, this is on a book. That was my brother and I at the monastery. My brother, he sent my brother to a farm because he could work there. But I went to different families. And one of them, the family lawyer, there's a book out called The Righteous, which is all about those people who helped Jews and took a chance with the family. They could have gone to camp too. So I had to be very courageous to have done this. That's the monastery, which is still there. It's now also part of the College of Louvain. And I remember the Madonna doing a bombardment was decapitated, but they put the head back on. That's the inside of the monastery. And that's the refectory where the monks ate, and I ate with them. Those monks were also had a vow of silence. They couldn't talk to each other. So he went to Mr. Loix and he said, "I have a child who is being, no fault of his own, is being persecuted. Can you take him?" And Pfeiffer, no. And Mr. Loix said, "Yes, I can." Now, both Loix had died, but I'm still in touch with the children. But they feel that because of me, their parents are in heaven now. Because of what they did. They took a chance. Not only that, the children could have gone, been executed. And then I became an instant Catholic. I went to Catholic school. And one time I was in the back of the class, and I was praying for my mother, praying for my sister. And the nun pointed out to me, to the class, "You see that? That's how I want you to pray." I became a model Catholic. Because I meant it. Most of them were mechanically praying, Ave Maria, but I was really praying. I really thought I was talking to a saint or asking for I became an acolyte. Father, one time, Père Bruno would have a mass in his apartment, and he used the fireplace mantelpiece as an altar. And he had a little gun, tiny gun, that he said he found in his one of his sister's house that the women carried in their purse, just in case. So he said, I said, "What do you have with that?" He said, "Well, we never know. I may need it." But it wouldn't have been much help with the Germans with the machine gun coming in. But I remember that gun, and I was surprised that he had a weapon. Then Louvain the city of Louvain was bombarded by the Americans and by the English. Carpet bomb. The bombs would fall all over the place. And we were hiding in the university basement because they had 3-level basement. We were way below and felt protected. And finally, Americans landed in Normandy, and then the liberation came. And I was hiding in the chateau. That's me on the right-hand side, looking about as Christian as I could be, with the family children. And I look almost like the sister, like the Chantal is my sister. I'm still in touch with her, Chantal. She's about my age now. That's another, I'm on the left here. We lived in a chateau because Madame Loix had a roommate in college, and she married an heir who had a chateau in Neder-Rockeziel, is a city in Belgium. And for a while we stayed in the chateau, which was safer than the city which were being bombed. And then eventually Americans came, and my first essay in school, in this country, we were supposed to write an essay on a remarkable day. I wrote an essay called "The Day the Tanks Came." And the teacher was so moved that she read it in class, that I'm writing about the day that an American tank came and we rode around the road welcoming them and waving and seeing Americans liberating us. I don't know if you've seen the series Bands of Brothers. It reminds me of that. I've been through that. It was unbelievable. Even the smell and the jeeps, the gasoline and all that. It was just incredibly amazing to be liberated by Americans. And that's true. At the chateau, there were two young boys who were German soldiers, and they lined us up against the wall. I thought they were going to execute us, but they didn't. They lined us up and they left. And they took our bicycles, and they bicycled down, and they were just running away because the Americans were coming, and the English to liberate us. We were liberated. There you go. The British captured Brussels and Antwerp. So I left the Lloyd's family, and then they were still fighting because Hitler was still alive. But eventually they captured Hitler. Belgium was liberated in 1944. And I lived with others. I even had dinner with the troops at one time. They invited us. They had a Slater system. It's where you lined up like a cafeteria. I never heard of that. To see a mound of mashed potatoes, a mound of peas, and you put it on your plate. It was unheard of to see that much food. And that was me in the left side, and my brother in the back is sort of angry at me about something. This newspaper, Gesundtbild, is from a German language Jewish newspaper called Aufbau. And in it they have Gesundtbild. We are looking for, and our names, my aunt and uncle, and my mother's sister, with Aunt Regina, had put an ad there looking for us, and we contacted them. And that's how we made able to come to this country. In 1946, December, I crossed the Atlantic on the Ile-de-France, which is a big luxury liner, but it was turned, it was half passengers, and the other one in the steerage, I was sleeping on a mattress down below. And we're coming to we could say we're going to the New World. I did a painting of the ship, the Ile-de-France. That was a photograph of me on my visa paper. I was 14 years old at the time. It's me and my brother. I arrived in Biscayne, New York, and I entered the high school. My first essay was the day of Thanksgiving. And that's me on the right in the chemistry class about to blow up something. They trusted me there. I went back at one time with my son, Adam, to thank Mr. and Mrs. Klotz before they died for what they did. I saw Père Bruno until he died in 79. Madame Lux died in 94, and so did Mr. Lloyd's. He was very well decorated. He did a lot of things. And he was Greek originally. And then Yad Vashem gave him an honor. He received a medal. And that's Père Bruno when I went back to see him. And he died, a simple grave. That's a medal from Yad Vashem, the rabbi. And what I'd like to do I have time? Okay. I want to end playing a tune on my harmonica. I don't know. Oh, I just lost some of my Germans played a song, which is a children's song, called Ich hatte eine Kamerade, which means I had a friend. We were in the battlefield together. A bullet came flying in the air. Was it for him or me? He fell by my side and he said, please hold my hand. And I said, I can't. I have to be charged. I have to reload my rifle. And the song goes, Ich hatte eine Kamerade, besser willst du nicht. I will play for you on the harmonica. Thank you very much.